The Obsessive Love by Xuckyxheese Chapter 7, Worries. Wish foosh, bang. On what seems to be nothing to an eye of an ordinary person, there were only sounds of dry and loud impact that filled the lands of the abyssal realm. Two individuals exchanging blows at inhumane speeds, one seething in rage with tears falling from his porcelain face who doesn't care about his rough appearance anymore, while the other, wearing a grim expression on his face, limiting his movement while trying to calm down his opponent. After the flurry of attacks on one another, they parted while both eyes are still locked on. Both gold eyes that has seemingly lost its glow stared at both eyes that resembled a fallen galaxy. It was necessary. Veldanava spoke. Necessary. You're sending Dawn to her own demise, Rimuru screamed. With his mind clouded in rage, he closed in their gap, readying to unleash a barrage of attacks onto him. Veldanava stepped back and focused on being defensive instead, deflecting powerful blows, trying not to hurt more broken individual. I only did what's for the best of you, Rimuru. Can't you see it? You've lost and sacrificed too many things to be here at this moment. How much more do you want to lose? Veldanava screamed back. Shut up. You don't know anything, old man. TCH, your daughter might hate me, but I'll do what I have to do. Not getting discouraged by it, Veldanava took advantage of Rimuru's mindless attacks towards him. Slipping past Rimuru, he took out a relatively similar orb in his pocket and crushed it into fine pieces. The shattered pieces of the orb started floating around with dim light colors on each of it and flew straight to Rimuru. Rimuru, who was still going at him, didn't notice that the pieces had already clinged into his clothes and some into his body. And as few seconds went by, the shards has activated its purpose. The pieces unleashed strong magical pulses that scattered throughout his body, seizing it up and had his movement disabled. With the remaining momentum of his now paralyzed body, Rimuru slid down the ground as magical pulses and aura flickered at his body. Rimuru, who was still brimmed with anger, forcefully moved his head, seeing Veldanava walking towards him. Why, you're scared, aren't you? Those words are what made Rimuru stiffen and made him silent. It was not even a tone that is asking him for confirmation. I know you too well. You're probably thinking that if you recovered a smidget of your powers, you'll flee this place. No, this system to be exact. Veldanava talked as he expressed his thoughts on Rimuru's supposedly plans. Yes, you'll flee, but how about them that risked their very life to protect you? In his agitation, he was unable to speak. He vividly recalled the faces on what Veldanava mentioned. How about Dawn? Will you leave her? He asked. Then I'll simply take her with me. Rimuru forcibly replied as he was still constrained by the shards. Will she even accept such thing? What? It was not by my own volition that Dawn went in there. But you tempted her. It was her purpose. I created her, Veldanava. And she's trying her very best to make her father happy. You, happy Rimuru. There were no founded words that can explain the thoughts of Rimuru's head when he heard it. As the shard slowly loses its power, the effects no longer hindered him, but he was overwhelmed with emotions that he did not understand. It was guilt. But why? A voice that sounds like a whisper leaked out. Veldanava helped Rimuru stood up before speaking. It's simple. Dawn was grateful that she was born, thanks to you. Dawn was a weapon. Rimuru sniffled as tears were slowly coming out once more. And having her gain sentience has made you feel better, no? Veldanava replied and took his time to continue. As I've said, in this realm time runs irregularly in here, and those times with her had made you recover a bit of what you have lost, Rimuru. So please. I beg of you, not as a successor or anything but as a father. Veldanava grasped onto both of Rimuru's shoulder. Take care of your daughter, during the battle in the abyssal realm. Location. Jura Forest. It was merely few days since Dawn has met Rimuru, or to say the past version of him. Dawn also helped out in the village she was in by doing meager chores or some heavy working stuff that even earned a voice of admiration coming from the dwarfs and hobgoblins. If only such peacefulness can stay forever, she thought. But alas, fate had already been put to stone regarding towards her father. She was currently on top of a tree, sitting on one of its branches, with her presence manipulation activated to the fullest. Dawn was waiting for a certain person to come out from the sealed cave. And surprise, surprise, the person came out running. Keeping at a certain distance, Dawn was following Rimuru. It was this time that another fateful encounter will commence. The meetup of the orgs. There was nothing in harm on what's going to happen after, but with worried thoughts that filled Dawn's head, she decided to follow her father towards to the meeting point. But it was at this moment Dawn stopped at her tracks. She closed her eyes and the crystallized horns that she covered had shown its appearance. Dawn instantly disappeared from her spot and landed to a new area, with her crystalline sword aiming at the neck of an unknown individual. Identify. Dawn spoke with her eyes glared towards the individual. Oh my, is this how your father raised you? How uncouth of him. But it's also the reason why I want him. The individual turned around facing Dawn. With long purplish locks, crimson red eyes and a bewitching smile on her face. The girl looked at Dawn with an interested look on her face. Dawn on the other hand glared at her. If looks can kill, then she would already be dead by now. It took a moment for Dawn to speak. So it's you, Seal. Chapter 8. Confrontation. Azure stares at Crimson eyes. Both trying to gauge one another, scrutinizing the tiniest movement their opponents make. While Rimuru and the ogres are having their confrontation, a much more intensifying battle was happening on the far side of the forest. Dawn, holding her crystalline sword tight, was moving deeper into the forest despite the barrage of attacks going at her. Dodging and weaving through magical projectiles despite Dawn herself being a mixed fusion of superior beings, a single hit would be fatal for her. She's strong, Dawn thought. How long will you keep running, little mouse? A voice came from up above. It was Seal levitating above the forest, smiling gleefully as she watched Dawn scurry down beneath her. Surrounded by numerous magic circles, moving her hands similar to a conductor without the baton, never removing her sight towards Dawn. TCH, she's toying with me, but knowing her there's definitely more than it meets the eye, Dawn grumbled in annoyance. Well then, psyching herself up for a moment, she stopped on her heels and turned to 180 degrees, running towards her. Her crystalline sword glowed in hue matching with her thoughts. Dawn propelled herself upwards and activated spatial transport. In a blink of an eye she appeared in front of Seal. She swung her sword towards her while Seal kept a composed face right in front of Dawn. Clang! A loud metallic-like sound reverberated near them, Dawn's sword mere inches to Seal's neck, on which is stopped by a barrier creating sparks. Fascinating, Seal spoke. Shut up! Dawn yelled, putting more strength towards her sword, causing Ciel's eyes to widen in surprise. She activated instant motion and teleported a tad bit far at Dawn. Her face contorts in displeasure. Ciel stared strongly at Dawn's weapon. Few milliseconds was all it takes for her to reach a conclusion. So your weapon renders everything null, ceasing the existence of laws and authority to everything it makes contact to. Ciel spoke, giving an accurate description towards her sword. Well, it's a fancy toy that old lizard gave me, Dawn replied. Ciel stayed immersed in her thoughts. She then snapped her finger and a sword similar to Dawn materialized at her hand. Then why don't we test it out more? Ciel asked. Dawn could only grip her sword tightly as she said those words. In an instant both of them disappeared from their place, teleporting from one place to another within the forest, exchanging flurry of attacks to one another, causing severe damage and aftershocks in the forest. Ciel remained composed as she swung her sword downward towards her. Dawn then immediately parried it as her left arm surged with magicule, delivering a palm strike in front of her. Having the attack completely blocked by one of her barriers, Ciel was still sent flying with the force coming from the strike. Ciel then repositioned herself midair and pointed a finger on Dawn, who was fast approaching. Bang! A white beam then flew at the tip of her finger. Dawn then killed her momentum and rolled to the side, hiding behind a tree. The phantom feeling of needing oxygen, she inhaled and exhaled hard as she felt a stinging sensation on the side of her neck. I am still here, she thought. Trying to keep her composure, she recollected the near-death moment she had. Ciel, she hesitated. But why? Dawn mumbled. Knowing full well of what Ciel can do, it was nigh impossible for her to miscalculate. Che, forget that, gotta focus right now. Boom. Cackle boom. Right before she hid behind the tree, Dawn then activated her presence manipulation at its fullest. So let's see. Being almost a carbon copy of father, she has all the arsenal like my father. She then focused on sensing the magicules around her. Damn it. Just like I thought, we're fighting in her imaginary space. Magicules went dull as I expected, so I can't stay too long here. Dawn looked to see the hand that's holding her sword shaking erratically. She held the handle of the sword tightly to ease it down. Feeling a sense of inferiority bloom within her, it only took mere seconds for her to cut it. I stop here, then everything will be useless. Can't back down now even when I disregarded father's word. Having a moment to rethink and steeled her resolution, she then exhaled and deactivated her presence manipulation. Dawn then went out from the tree she was hiding in, showing herself to Seal, who scorched the whole place except at her spot that she was in seconds before. Seal, without a speck of dirt within her clothes, remained still with a small smile on her face. Have enough time to think, little mouse? Seal asked. Just enough to put away to stop a lunatic like you, that is, Dawn smirked. Lunatic? Me? Her tone and expression completely shifted. Dawn subconsciously took a step back on the aura Seal was releasing. Her face completely devoid of the expression she had before. For a vermin like you to insult me like that, you may have inherited some parts of my beloved, but I won't hesitate to put you down, little mouse. Seal, who was now enraged, sharpened her aura to a degree. Dawn, sensing something amiss on her, only responded with putting herself on an unsheathing stance. Yes, I may not be like father, but I will end this. For him? Dawn glared at her, preparing one of her trump cards. Then you will die. Shedding her casual appearance, Dawn crystallized horns grew and vivid magic symbols started showing all around her visible skin. With thoughts seemingly collide, one move is all it takes for it to end this all. Both Seal and Dawn never letting each other go out of sight. It's all or nothing, both of them thought. And right at that moment. Null. Ephemera. Suspended world. Both of them used their strongest cards at the same time. Inhale, exhale as expected. Even if my beloved created you for the sole purpose of destroying me. An entity weeks old like you can't move in this stopped world. Inhale, ha. Seal, no. Apot spoke between breaths, staring at Dawn, who was about to unsheath her sword. Can't maintain this for too long. VOTW is no longer in my command, as time has been reverted and you. Apot closed her eyes and can see a faint human figure in her mind glaring at her. Seal, can't you see this is for the better for us? Now stay down and let me stay in control. She yelled, putting more pressure on the Encadia isolation that's binding Seal. The image slowly diminished within Apatie's mind. Regaining full control on the body once more, she walked over to the frozen Dawn. Standing in front of her, she pointed her finger straight at her head. Despite Apot having irregular breathing, she held a grin on her face. I won, Dawn. Say hi to my beloved from the other side, she spoke. Manipulating the surrounding infants within the suspended world with ease, she made a finger gun and aimed at Dawn's head. Zap. And it was also this moment she found an irregularity in this situation. Despite shooting a compressed disintegration point blank, not a smidget of a hole appeared on Dawn's face. Feeling a sense of unease, Apot fired a few more before stopping. What's this? She exclaimed. Apot analyzed the surrounding infants at Dawn. The infants are getting erased. Null. Ephemera. Wah. She heard a voice she least expected. Dawn, who unexpectedly moved within the suspended world, swung her crystalline sword. The blade, on which its color resembled that of a void, had hit its mark on Apot's chest. Apot, feeling severe pain for the first time in her life, cried in agony, tearing up as she looked at her body with a large wound. Why you? Apot glared. Dawn, who was experiencing the backlash of using her unique skill for the first time, was rendered weak. She used her sword as a cane to support herself standing up. Null. Ephemera, true to its name, is a skill under Null that voided everything under a short period. While the sword itself nullifies everything it makes contact with, the skill only amplifies the weapon's ability. The moment Dawn was unavailable to move within the suspended world, the skill was already active, burning a huge amount of fuel within Dawn's current tank capacity. But it's not enough, Dawn thought as she clicked her tongue in annoyance. What was left on the skill that hit Apot was nothing more than fumes. Apot, struggling to keep standing up, kneeled as both the imaginary space and suspended world crumble around them. Hey, it's not over yet. Dawn. Apot spoke. Your skill is rendering most of my spells inactive, while you on the other hand no longer have the strength to fight me, she continued. Apot then had a magic circle at the top of her palm. Dawn, who analyzed the circle a tad bit late, grabbed her sword back-handed as she tried to move of what is left of her strength. Don't you dare, Seal. Dawn yelled. Let's call it a tie. Until next time, little mouse, a pot spoke. And as the surrounding magic crumbles, Seal 2 had already teleported elsewhere. Dawn was back at the forest, seeing the natural scenery around her. Tears started falling from her eyes. Kneeling down on the ground, she gripped the dirt beneath her as Dawn continued to cry.